What's up, everybody? My name is Nick. I'm from Catskill Mountain Customs, a tiny shop in upstate New York, up in the trees. And just a little bit about my background. I've always been into cars, motorcycles, things like that. About 10 years ago, I started Catskill Mountain Customs, and my primary focus at that time was custom motorcycles. I was doing ground-up custom motorcycles, and I had some fabrication skills. I learned to weld. I could bend tube, notch tube. But at that time, I was still in the place where I was looking for tanks and fenders that would fit my build. And I was really constrained by my designs by what I could find, right? Because you got this frame, you need your clearances, and you're like, oh, what tank is out there? Can I modify it? Can I make it fit? And eventually I just kind of got frustrated by having to deal with that. And I was like, you know what? I seen Jesse James do it a bunch. I'm gonna make a gas tank. How hard could it be? And I just kind of got the bug for metal shaping. So over time, I found like I was almost like tailoring my bike builds to the metal shaping I got to do for it. Like I didn't even want to mess with the other stuff. I just wanted to make these cool tanks. So starting, up maybe 5 years ago, my business, I just kind of started narrowing down the metal shaping. Now that's all I do. I do a lot of motorcycle stuff. I've gone into a lot of aircraft stuff. I've made the entire front nose of a vintage Cessna last year. That's really tedious, meticulous work. But it's super rewarding because when you're working with aircraft, it's got to be right and it's got to go to the parameters. You know what I mean? You're using 2024 aluminum. It can't be shrunk. It's in a T3 hardness. Lots of times when you're working it, so it acts like a lot like spring steel. So when you're working with that kind of stuff, you have to really understand what we call the principles or fundamentals of metal shaping, right? Because we just saw NOAA. We saw some techniques to hand shrink. That doesn't work on aircraft panels, right? It's gonna crack if you try to shrink it. So everything needs to be done with all stretch, but you can't end up with aluminum foil at the end. And that's kind of what led me to be here with Baileigh. I did my first 10 years shaping metal. Everything was hand tools and English wheel. I went over to Mike Wagner's shop to do his podcast once, and I got on his power hammers, and I said, I think I need one. So it just kind of happened through coincidence. I told Mike I was looking for one. I was trying to look for one used, save some money. And it just popped up that Mark Garish was selling a power hammer and an MH19. And the lineage of that machine is it was Chris Rush's. Where is it? There he is. It was actually one of his early machines that he was using the prototype and design. And so now it's in my shop. We've done some upgrades to it to make it more modern. Baileigh has a kit to upgrade the upper mechanism to this new modern mechanism. Makes it run a little bit smoother, hit a little bit harder. But it's really cool because I got like one of the OG MH19s and it's all beat up and it's chipped and it's really worn in. So that's what we're going to be working on mostly today. We're going to be using the MH19 and we're going to be piggybacking on what Noah talked about. You're going to hear us all talk about the fundamentals of metal shaping, right? We have our shape, form. I also like to think of it in terms of surface area, okay? So we can teach you techniques to shrink metal, to stretch metal, but if you don't really understand why you're doing it, you're going to be limited to what you make. Like I can show you how to make a motorcycle fender, but if I can help you guys understand how we're making it, then you can make anything, all right? So I have one here. I have a fender. I got my paper pattern on it. It's just loosely taped on. And Noah touched on this a little bit, but you can see where my paper is tucking up here. When I look at that, to me, that represents a change in surface area of this panel, right? We need to eliminate surface area on the sides of the panel. But what's important is the contrast in surface area. Okay, so when I'm looking at this, I see that we've got more surface area up here than we do on the sides. So we can approach that in a couple different ways, right? We need to create this contrast in surface area. So we could shrink the sides, which is what we're going to do on the MH19. It makes quick work of it. But we could also stretch the center. If you want, you could do this entire panel by starting stretching the center and working down the sides, as long as we create the contrast in surface area. Generally, though, to make the best part, you want to do a little bit of both, especially if it's a part with a lot of shape. We'll do a lot of shrink and we'll do some stretch too, because if we rely too much on one or the other, it might be overly time consuming or you might end up with a piece of aluminum foil at the end. So That's the way I like to look at things when I'm looking at the pattern as far as shape. The other thing that Noah talked about was form, right? You might also hear the term arrangement being thrown around. That's something like Racially kind of coined that. That means form. When I look at form, I think of bending. That's form, all right? And when you're learning, if you're kind of thinking about it, something that got my head around it is if you could easily undo it, that's probably form, right? We could bend something, and then we just put it back. That's form. Shape, now I've stretched the metal. I can't just push that back. All right, once we stretch the metal, we've increased the surface area. We'd have to shrink that back down if we wanted to go back away completely. You know, we could blend it in, but that's the way I think about form and shape. When we're altering shape, we're altering the surface area. When we're altering form, we're not. So form and shape are different, obviously, but they work together. Even though they're different, if one's not right, the other's not right. So when you're making your part, a lot of people fall down a trap where we have our radius gauges, like these cool ones from Cornfield Customs. Go get yourself one. And you're working your panel and you're checking your radius. And you can keep going like that and say, oh, I got to stretch more here, I got to shrink more here. But if your form's not right, that's all for nothing. And then when you put your panel into the proper form, that's all going to change. So looking at where this thing is now, we'll just go approximately. What we got here? All right, what is that? A 3, right? We got a 3, everybody see that? That's about what it is. And then going the other way, going in this direction, we're not quite a 12. More than 24, not quite a 12. What we got here? I don't know. It's around it's like 15 or something like that. But this is a 3 in this form. So now if I were to take it and adjust it a little bit, and I'm just adjusting the form, okay? So now, let's see where we're at here. Okay, now we're right about a 12, but if I look at my radius this way, I am about 3.5. Yep, now I'm at 3.5. If we go more, now I'm closer to a 4, and it'll keep going that way. So what that demonstrates is you could be making something like this. The shape is a common shape in autos, right? If you look at vintage cars, the big flying front fenders, it's the same shape. You could be working on this. You could be checking your radius and say like, oh, I need more stretch in the center or more shrink on the sides, but your form's wrong. So what's going to happen is you're going to keep working on that panel and your form isn't right. And then when you put it to your buck in the correct form and put it back, now you've overstretched it, okay? So form and shape work together. If one's wrong, the other's wrong. So it's okay, and we're going to do it. You can take the panel like I just did. We can take it out of the proper form in order to get it on a machine and work it more efficiently. But when it comes back to checking that radius, we got to make sure it's back in the correct form. So that's why we use our bucks. Here's a quick wooden buck. The paper is going to show us our shape, right? It shows that change in surface area. The paper's flexible. It doesn't show us the form. So the buck is what shows us the form. That's going to show us the right form it's got to be in, the right radius to get it right. And when you get the form right and you get the radius right, you're going to get a panel that fits. Okay? Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah, getting a little deep this morning. Okay. And then we can put it back. And when I squeeze this radius back, the radius this way is going to open up. Make sense? All right, sweet. Let's get on the power hammer. Let's start making one. So when I'm shrinking on the power hammer, when I'm working on the power hammer in general, right? this is a strong machine. I don't try to fight the machine, right? You're going to see a lot of people, and we'll see with Mike, when Mike does like the real extreme shrinking, you're going to have to grab that panel when you're going real deep. But I like to be relaxed with the panel. Like Chris showed us yesterday, I feed straight in, I come out with a light tip down, but my hands are light on the panel. There's no need to try to fight this thing because you're not going to win. So relax, we're going to feed it straight in, come out, we're going to go straight down. Now, Noah talked about the shrinking, right? We're taking away that surface area, and if you looked at the tucks in my pattern, they look like V's. So as we come in, it's got to shrink and pull down around. So my first round of shrinking, I'm going to go this dotted line here, and then I'm going to come back, I'm going to go lower. And what we're going to need is going to need more shrinking along the edge than we do up here because we're making a radius. If I were to just bring all my shrinks into the same spot over and over again, I'm going to make a 90, right? We need to progressively shrink as we go down. Okay, so first shrink. And what we'll do, for anybody who didn't get a look at it yesterday, that's the tuck, right? Looks a lot like what Noah did by hand. So this just obviously does it faster and easier. Mike, did you get a look at this? You see how it works? All right, cool. So we form our tuck, and then as we come out, the flat of the dies is going to squish that down, just like we did with the hammer. One thing we want to keep in mind, Chris touched on this too, is this hammer's powerful. So we're using a flat to bring this down, but if we harp on one spot too long, we're going to start shrinking and kind of undo the progress that we're making. So we feed it in. And I just coined it out a little bit, see that there? What we want to do is we want to feather off the pedal as we get towards the edge, because we start smashing on the edge, we're going to coin the edge. Not the end of the world, but it happens. And all of these machines, they all kind of just like a little bit of a different feel. You'll probably feel them if you run this one, that one, as to how they feather off when you let off the pedal. So it's just a matter of getting comfortable with the machine. It's going to happen to everybody. Don't worry about it. So I'm going to run around the shrinks here. You can see I'm not fighting with the panel, being relaxed about it. If you leave that up a little bit while you're running your hammer, not a big deal. You can leave it till the next round. Or these hammers are they're like sewing machines. They're so precise that you can get in there and just literally tap it. All right? And all I'm looking at making a shape like this is trying to be symmetrical on each side. Sometimes I'll start my shrinks in the middle, sometimes in the edge. It just kind of feels right for what panel you're making. But what I'm really just trying to focus on is keeping them relatively symmetrical. First round of shrinks, we see it putting in a little shape already. Okay, and we're going to try, if we have time, we'll put a little reverse curve in this. And so that's why I'm staying behind these black lines pretty much. It'll be kind of counterproductive if we start shrinking there. So next round I'm going to go to the blue line. And I kind of, when I do my second one, I go in between the shrinks I just made, right? So I'll go here, 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 here. It just kind of helps me kind of keep things symmetrical. But you can shrink right on top of one you already did. You're going to do it eventually. And you can see I'm not fighting with the panel. I'm just trying to stay relaxed, let the thumbnails do their things, do their thing. And also, when I start, I like to get the panel right on the beginning of the thumb in there. That way, when I'm starting off, I'm not bashing that edge. So the panel, I'm keeping it right at the thumb when I'm bringing it in. Okay. Second round, you can see it's starting to take shape. We still have a long way to go. So I'm going to do another round. I'm just going to really tighten up this edge. I'm going to stay right along, right in the middle there. So I consider that my first round of shrinks on this panel. We're going to have to do plenty more, as you can see. But something I mentioned before is we're creating a difference in contrast in surface area, right? So I need less surface area here than I have here. So I can just keep shrinking this around. Totally, that'll work. But what else can I do? Stretch, right? I don't know who said that. With my microphone's here, I got no direction. Yeah, we can stretch the middle, right? That's going to increase the contrast. So I'll just jump on this bag quick. All right, that'll just help get us there a little bit. And what I really like about these Baileigh machines, when I was shopping for a machine, is how quick and easy these die changes are. Because with the legacy machines, you have to knock out shims and wedges, and you know, changing dies is time consuming. But this kind of has changed the way that I work, because I jump between dies a lot when I'm working. Some people like to stay and rough everything out before they go and smoothing stuff, but I kind of like to rough it in a little bit, smooth out a little bit, see where I'm at, and keep going. So when, you know, die changes are so fast, that's not a big deal. So I got my flat top master, and I've got a number 6, I believe, down there. Because we're working aluminum, this is a powerful machine. If we just go to too steep of a die, like a number 3, we're probably gonna do some damage, right? It's gonna really pinch that metal and maybe overstretch or do some damage. But I've got a number 6 in here. This radius is already steep, like about 3. So if I just try to run the 6 in there, it's going to hit on the sides. But we talked about form and shape, right? What happened when I took some of the form out of it, I flattened it. Now the 6 will go in there no problem, and it's not going to do a whole lot of damage on my panel. So smooth it out. So we added a little bit more stretch, just kind of smooth out those hammer marks a little bit. And then we can jump right back into shrinking. These brand new hammers, the tolerances are so tight. Sometimes you got to fiddle with them to get them in. Once you use it a little bit, they just pop right in and out. Yeah, for sure. That's you know, that's how I did it for 10 years. Yeah, like I said, it doesn't. What matters is form and shape, right? How we get there doesn't really matter. You use what you got at your disposal. Obviously, the power hammer is going to do it faster. You know, English wheel has its benefits too. It's kind of nice being in your shop, nice and quiet, wheeling things out. But yeah, what matters is what we're doing with the surface area and the panel, with the form and shape. It doesn't really matter how we get there. So you could absolutely do this with an English wheel. You could do this whole thing on the English wheel, and a lot of people do. You know, we just like the power hammers. So we're going to get started on the second round of shrinking. I'm going to give a little bit more of a demonstration. I'm going to have somebody come up, and you guys take care of this for me, okay? Sound good? Again, I'm being relaxed with it. I'm starting with my panel, like right at the base of the thumb, letting it feed in, letting it feed out. Slight down on the way back. Don't go crazy. Maybe I could demonstrate. If you start pulling too hard down, what you're going to get is you're trying to bend the metal, and we haven't shrunk enough yet, and there's no place for the metal to go, so you get these peaks, right? When you're pulling it down, it's like just grabbing it and wrenching it down, and the metal's going to peak up, and you're going to start making a mess. So let the machine work. It'll come down as we shrink. It'll want to be, it'll want to be down as we shrink more. So it's going for the second round. And don't be afraid when you're learning. Like when I first started with the power hammer, I was like, stop. Stop. Move over. As you get more comfortable, you can keep it running. And what I'm doing as I keep it running is I'm actually keeping the edge of the panel right on like the very base of the thumb. That's what I'm looking at because I don't want it to coin out that edge too bad. So I'm keeping it right at the base of the thumb as I move sideways. Okay, I'm going to do one more pass to the blue and tighten up the edges, and then someone's going to come up and take over. You can see we're getting some peaks here. That's because, like we talked about, the edge needs to be shrunk way more than in here. So right now we're bringing this down and that metal's got no place to go, right? That's a good indicator that we're going to have to spend some time shrinking there. So we'll go right along the edge. All right, who feels like they can do it? Who's ready to give it a try? So I'm going to start tightening up around this edge, and then we're going to talk a little bit about reverse. We'll see how much time we have, and we'll put a little bit of reverse in it. But
you're about 15 minutes.
All right. I've got no concept of 15 minutes. Tell me a 10. All right, so I'm going to real quick throw this on the planching hammer, smooth it out a little bit, and then we'll put a little bit of reverse curve in it. Just to form a little bit, and we'll get some shape out of it. The goal of this is we don't have the time to make a beautiful looking fender, but you can see the process is working, right? We're getting there, we're getting a radius this way, we're getting a radius this way. If I want to bring it around tighter, I could shrink along these bottom edges to bring this top radius around tighter, or I could stretch up top. I just got to increase that contrast, and it's going to want to come around. Same thing, if I were to make this and it's a little bit too tight around, I could stretch down here and let it out and let it back up. All right, we just got to remember that when we're working on something like a buck, we got to be checking our form, make sure it's in the correct form before we start checking our radius and making decisions about shrinking and stretching. All right, so real quickly, I'm going to give it one more round of shrinks around this edge to pull this around a little bit more, and then I'm going to swap over and we're going to put like a little reverse curve lip on it, right? And we'll take a look at how that works. You guys can probably guess. To make this shape, to go this direction, we need to shrink down here, stretch up here. That's the contrast that we're looking for. To go reverse, we just reverse it. I'm going to be stretching down here. It's going to be difficult for us to shrink in here. There are ways to do it, but purposely I've been staying off this because this is all stretched already. So we already have a contrast there between here and here. If I were to be stretching here this whole time and then try to put the reverse, I would have to really stretch down here to get enough contrast and surface area to bring it around. So that's why we've been staying off that. And right now you can see where my dies are stopping because I got this thing in this sort of form. So I'm hitting on the machine as I try to feed it in. So when you're working material that happens, just open it up, change the form, then you can get it in there. Okay. All right, so to make the reverse, we're going to do a little bit of linear stretching. Basically, that means we're using a die, we're stretching linearly in a straight line along this edge. There's a lot of different ways that you could set up the dies in the power hammer to allow it to get into your panel. Sometimes doing something like this, I'll actually use 2 linear stretch dies and the ability of the hammer to index. So I'll put my lower die this way and the upper die the opposing way. and that'll allow you to work inside, because I'm having my linear stretch come perpendicular to the edge, right? So if I have a die this way, that'll sit in there, and then I can use the die the other way and work it, or vice versa. But that's unnecessary for right now. So think about it this way. So I'm using linear stretch on the bottom this time, and I'm going to use the flat die on top, and we'll see how that works out. Doesn't matter. You can use the linear stretch on top, flat die on the bottom. It will matter a little bit on how much cleanup you have to do on your surface area. On your surface, the linear stretch die will leave a bit more marks, but not a big deal. All the dies are polished, so it's not terrible. And the same thing with linear stretch goes for shrink. We're going to need more on the edge than we are on the inside, right? Because we're opening it this way. We're doing the reverse of the shrink. So I'm going to start deep and then work my way out. In this scenario, this is going to blow out the edge of the panel. There's not really a lot of ways to avoid it. I mean, you can kind of try to set up your dies to be a little more conscious of it, but for what we're doing here, like trying to move things fast, it's going to blow out the edge of the panel. We'll just trim it off. And as we're stretching the edge, right, we can see there's too much material there. It has no place to go, so it's getting wavy in there. So that means that we just need a little bit more inboard stretch. But we could already see what's happening, right? Just that fast. All right, see a shape coming around? Let's clean it up. Now this is something too. I'm going to struggle with this. I don't have a reverse curve upper die for these planchette hammers right now. We can do it on the power hammer with a radius die in the top. This is something personally I like to planch out on the English wheel, because you can bring it in forward and the top wheel will roll in your reverse. And you want to be real gentle in here, because if I squeeze it too much and stretch in here, my reverse is going to start going away, right? So when you're planching in here and working your reverse in here, you want to be real careful in that center section of the panel. And I do feel like the English wheel does like a nice job of it. But you could also be try to be gentle on the power hammer, which I'm going to do. They also make for planchette hammers reverse curve upper dies you can get. That'll fit in there. You just got to be kind of gentle with them. And I'll just open up the form a little. All right, and just for the sake of demonstration, let's sneak behind everybody. We're going to use this shrinker stretcher here and just tighten up this edge. Generally, Chris mentioned this yesterday, I generally only use my kick shrinker stretcher to like fine tune things on the end. I use them a lot of flanges. One thing that you do have to be careful of with these types of shrinkers is if you're doing them in an area that you're going to be welding on that same edge, the weld's going to want to move a little bit more. When we thumbnail shrink or tuck shrink on the mallet with a mallet and bag or a stump, we really lock in at a molecular level. We're locking in the metal and wants to be there. This is kind of forcing it together, so. All right. Clean it up just a little bit more, and I think we'll take some questions. That. All right. Thanks, guys.